Hi, everyone. I'm Samira Daswani, the host of the podcast, The Patient from Hell. Today, I have the utmost pleasure of welcoming Dave to our podcast. Dave is the co founder of Power Monkey, but I will let him tell you more about that. Just wanted to tease that in front of you guys. One of the reasons I'm super excited to have Dave join us is he actually spends most of his time not in the cancer universe, but has started to work in the cancer world with us, and I think can offer us, the cancer community, a lot of advice and guidance for a key area of survivorship, that is fitness. So, with that, Dave, I'd love for you to tell us one, where you're joining us from, and two, a little bit more about you and how you came to found Power Monkey.
Absolutely. Well, first, Samara, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. I'm coming in from Italy right now. I've transferred over here for a little while, a 3-month period to help on a fitness project with a brand, a fitness brand, Techno Gym. So I'm on east coast of Italy, right on the water, which has been really nice for me and my family to kind of experience a little bit of something different for a while. So I am a little bit away from the West Coast, but yeah, it's been a nice change of pace. As far as my background, I come from the gymnastics world. So I was a gymnast my entire life, growing up, having done it in New Jersey at a pretty, high level in terms of club. Fortunate enough to get a scholarship to compete at Stanford University, and after I graduated, I made Team USA and was able to compete for Team USA for a number of years. I moved to the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. I lived out there for 4.5 years. I was on a few world championship teams. I was fortunate enough to go to Beijing in 2008 as part of the Olympic team as one of the alternates. I was on a few world, a bunch of different things during those fun years. And then after my competitive year, I went back to Stanford, helped coach a team to a national championship as an assistant coach, and kind of got into the coaching world a little bit through that. I found CrossFit. And CrossFit was kind of my conduit to bringing gymnastics to people who did not grow up with it. So I have such a deep passion for teaching people movement and how to better their technique, and so CrossFit was just a natural fit. I enjoy doing the workouts. I enjoy the learning experience, and so it was just a natural fit for me to be able to pass along my passion for the sport to the people that did not grow up with it. And from there, me and a partner of mine who was also a high level gymnast. He's a stunt coordinator in New York City. I had been living out in Italy, in Rome around that time, and in Venice, and I moved back to New York and was doing some performing. And me and my partner met, and we started to have some ideas around some ring training devices, gymnastics training devices for the CrossFit and fitness world. And Power Monkey was actually an existing company, and they were based down in Florida. And we had an idea for a ring training device. And the gymnastics world is kind of normally known as a dream machine. It's a 50-50 device that kind of works through a pulley system that takes away 50% of your body weight, so you can work on more advanced technical movements without actually having the strength. So
Huh.
we thought it would be a great tool to actually have manufactured, have one really well made, so that CrossFitters could work on more challenging movements, but with good technique. And so Power Monkey was the equipment manufacturing company that decided to come on board with us and help manufacture it for us. So I was kind of a traveling salesman for a number of years with just these little backpacks of ring things going around with me. And it kind of grew from there. We became partners with them. And then eventually, about close to 10 years ago now, me and my partner bought them out and transferred the company into more of an education company. So we do a lot of fitness events, retreats. We have an app. We do a lot more education within the digital space as well. So it's become, you know, a really fun project that we've been able to expand beyond gymnastics with a lot of other niche sports and coaches. And one of the things that we kind of like to consider ourselves different is that a lot of our coaches, or all of our coaches, were former elite athletes who transitioned to coaching. So we have a perspective that's maybe a little bit different than people that just get into coaching. We know what the athletes are going through. We understand that athlete perspective at a very high level, and are now, a go-to resource within this space when it comes to coaching and technique.
Dave, one, what a cool story. I wish I had your life. I do not think I could be a gymnast, though. Nope, don't think I could do that.
I,
But that
I, I
is
guarantee
such an
you,
incredible story.
I guarantee you'd surprise yourself. We get people all the time that say that exact same thing, and within a couple of turns, a couple of days, a couple of sessions, we get them doing handstands and doing things they never thought they'd be able to do. So, I think you're more capable of things than you think you are.
Oh, thank you, Dave. I feel very, thank you. I feel very validated in my potential to be a gymnast. Dave, I'd love to start with tell us more about you. You've made this pretty cool transition from being a elite athlete yourself to being a salesperson to be a business person and now doing a lot of education and coaching. Talk to us about what that transition felt for you.
Sure. So, I mean, I never envisioned myself going into coaching. And in fact, I kind of actively pursued a career away from coaching. When I was an athlete, I think anyone who was an athlete at any level, the higher level you go, the more you realize that an athletic life can be very lonely, especially in a sport that is an individual sport
Hmm,
where you're
hmm,
very focus driven on your own purpose. And I think,
hmm,
athletes need to be that if you want to achieve the highest level of successes. So, you end up doing things that are very self-absorbed. You push away family and friends and say like this is a priority. I wasn't able to have relationships and those kind of things during my training years. It was um, very much about the end goal. Like I need to be able to maximize my human potential. Like I need to maybe not win the Olympic gold medal, but make sure that when I'm done with this, I have no regrets in terms of what my body is physically capable of doing. So during that process, I didn't even consider like I would watch my coach us, especially at the Olympic Training Center, and just be like, I don't have it in me. I don't physically have the ability to do what he
hmm,
does. He's so in tune
hmm,
with every individual. He's so in tune with every day coming in the gym and knowing what's appropriate for what we need on that specific day. We'd have a plan written up for us, and you go in and it gets changed according to whether or not you have an injury, whether or not you have something mentally going on, whether or not you're maybe feeling a little better than you thought. So let me push a little bit harder today. And he was able to do that just by looking at us. And I really thought he could read minds for my entire time there. 5 years of training center, I thought he could read my mind. And I was like, I just don't have it in me to be able to be a coach at
hmm,
this level. So I just really never pursued it. I never
hmm.
thought it would be something that I would be interested in. So I did accept the 1 year coaching position at Stanford after I was done because it was a little bit of unfinished business. Like our team at Stanford when I was there in the late 90s and early 2000s, we were not great. We were kind of in between periods where Stanford was amazing. Mid 90s, Stanford unstoppable, great dynasty, and now Stanford again is in this incredible period of having not lost in the last 4 years, and they're going to go on to win who knows how many more titles in a row.
Hmm.
But we were in this little down period and we weren't very good. And so um, I felt like I wanted to go back and check something off of my list to be
Hmm.
able to say, I won that national championship
Yeah.
with Stanford. And fortunately, we did.
Hmm.
I went back in 2009, and it was the first national championship that we won in 14 years. And I was able to get my NCAA championship
Wow.
ring and help the team get back on the top of the podium. So, and that really kind of like started this path of, you know what, I enjoy it, but it was a 1 year contract, and then I moved it back to Italy. I moved to Rome, and I was like, I need a time to move away from the sport of gymnastics. The intention was to get into the wine industry. I'm a fan of wine. I wanted to learn a little
That's
bit more
awesome.
about the wine industry, and I had an unfortunate incident when I first got to Rome, or uh, a couple of months in. I fell skiing in Austria, and I blew my knee out, and I had to do rehab, and I went to the rehab after my surgery, and it was all these little old ladies just kind of rehabbing and not really wanting to get better and just kind of hanging out, and me like rehabbing as if I'm like trying to compete for the Olympics again. And I started during my rehab process. Part of it was going into a gymnastics gym in Rome, and I started to work with some kids, and I started to enjoy it, and I started to really kind of like the process of kind of seeing the enjoyment of the kids, and how much they really liked the simple movements. And I started to kind of fall in love with it slowly during this rehab process. And when I right around the same time, I had found CrossFit, was doing the workouts kind of on my own. And when I saw that this emergence of this whole new cohort of people that never cared about gymnastics at all could potentially be an avenue for us to expose the sport to more people, especially men's gymnastics, which is normally just an afterthought. I thought, you know what, this could be an incredible opportunity to pass along something that I love, and it felt like an easy way to get to people that weren't ever interested in it, and it kind of grew from there. So my coaching career kind of happened because of an injury, believe it or not, because of a failed skiing experiment. So that's why I'm here.
That's pretty remarkable. There was something that you said that struck me when you were describing your time as an athlete. You were talking about it being kind of very individualistic, very self-absorbed. You have your priorities. You have this very well-defined goal and this purpose that drives you. And then I heard you describe your time as the coach of the Stanford team, and it was all about the team.
Hmm.
So even in that small window, I feel as though there was a transition that happened. Is that a fair reflection from what you
Well,
said?
yeah, I mean, I'm glad you pointed that, because I don't want to make it seem like I have never viewed gymnastics as an individual sport. In fact, every positive moment that I have in my head within the sport, even the winning national championships and as an individual, every real memorable moment has been part of a team, even from when I was a kid. Growing up in New Jersey, we had a really great club team, Insurgents Elite. I'm really proud of that experience, and it made me want to compete for a collegiate team. And the bonds, the relationships, the people that you end up becoming who you are with. Those are the things I really remember, and that's why I wanted to compete for Team USA. But there were moments in there, and I look at this as a period within my competitive career where I made a mistake. It was something that I tried to change when I moved to the Olympic Training Center. Leading up to the '04 Olympic Games in Athens, I just missed out on the Olympic team. I was part of the Olympic selection process team. The last 10 guys, they took 8 to Athens. I was one of the 2 that they didn't take to Athens. Um, I did everything I could, and I was in the best shape of my life. I was so ready competitively, but I was mentally a mess, like just a complete mess, because I
Mm,
had shut everyone out. I thought that, if I don't talk to my friends, it means that I'm putting more effort into my training. If I, don't go out and hang out, or, don't go home for the holidays, that it means that it's showing that I want this more than maybe the other competitors. And I put myself in such a mentally um, kind of struggle point that it came to a head at one point, and I just mentally broke down, and I was like, this is just awful. Like, everything that I'm doing physically well, it's the complete opposite is happening on the mental side. So I promised myself that I wouldn't do that when I moved to the training center. So I found balance in my teammates and things outside of the sport. I made sure that I kept up with my friends, and that allowed me to recognize that, the path that I took was not the right one. And so when I went back to Stanford with the guys on the team, I put an extra emphasis that if we're going to win this, we need to really recognize that every single person has value here, from the top guy who's contributing in the all around
mm,
all the way to the guy that's a one eventer, or the guy that maybe is injured and not competing the entire year. Everyone has a purpose in us being able to perform at our highest
mm.
potential. And I've taken kind of the same mentality in terms of Power Monkey, and what we do as the small brand that we are, and the events that we put on. Everybody contributes equally, no matter where you are on that rung on the ladder.
I love that story. I really appreciate you sharing that because I
Oh, of
think
course.
in sharing that, it actually sets up the topic that I was hoping for us to talk about, which is fitness in the cancer world. And I feel as if fitness and the cancer world are so intricately linked, right? The physical and mental kind of just it's you can't unpack those. And I can share a personal story from my side. I recently went back to martial arts. I used to train in Taekwondo and recently went back, and this is me as a survivor. And I find myself in these classes, which are phenomenal. I have a phenomenal coach, actually, a couple of coaches, and I'm going back as an adult, surrounded by kids, and it's been quite an experience. And what I find myself struggling with is the fight language. In that, in Taekwondo, it's a fighting sport, and we also do
Hmm.
judo, and that's a very physical fighting sport, and it is all about like how you show up on that mat in that dojang. But there's all this like, you can do it. Of course, you got this person. Get up. You fell down. Get back up. But all of that language is actually exactly the same as the language used in the cancer world. So I find myself for the first time back in the dojang really struggling with the fight
Mm.
language, and find myself like going back into my head and receding in my head. And my coach keeps telling me, stop thinking, get back on the mat, just don't think. And it's a funny experience for me because during my day, of course, I'm thinking quite a bit. So
Sure.
I'd love for you to talk about the mental and physical and how that's shown up in the cancer work you do.
Well, I mean, I appreciate the kind of emphasis on the work we've done with cancer, but I don't want to overemphasize it. I feel like we've contributed in the ways that we can, but by no means have we done anything comparable to maybe what we hope to do or maybe what we know is necessary within the community. But I'd say more about our Power Monkey camp because that's where we've done our most kind of outreach to various communities, and one of them have been the cancer community. And just a brief background on our camp itself: it's a full week long adult fitness camp. We do it out in the woods of Tennessee. It's a 150-acre campus. It's a beautiful spot. It's a kids gymnastics camp in the summers that's owned by two Olympians that are great friends, and we're on our 10-year anniversary this year. We do two a year, and it's kind of a big year for us. And um, what what we intended to do with the camp was to put on a great informational week and bring in, like I said, all of these experts from these various niche sports, weightlifting and kettlebell training and jump rope and rowing and running and all of these other things that CrossFit has allowed some growth within. And we thought that if we could bring everybody to this spot, we could teach everyone some really intricate and in-depth things over the course of this week. What we didn't anticipate was that it turned into a real experience. And the bonds that were grown and the relationships that were built over the course of this week were absolutely incredible. Like, we had our first camp in 2014, and it was a tiny camp. We were still kind of growing it. We had more coaches than we did participants. And when everyone was leaving, the campers were getting on the bus to leave, and many of them were crying about leaving the experience.
Wow.
And I couldn't believe that people had grown so close to the other people within their groups and the other campers in that short a period of time. And it led me to believe that this event was going to turn into something bigger than just an informational week. And it absolutely did. And, the relationships that have continued to grow, the job opportunities. We've had 3 engagements from camp. We've had 3 marriages from camp. We've had a couple of kids
Wow.
born from the relationships from camp. We've had a marriage at camp with 2 of our staff members. Like, those are things that I never intended or anticipated ever happening. But the reason why I bring it up is because it's one of the reasons why the cancer survivors that have come to camp had the experience that they had. It's because of this community that embraces everyone and just says that no matter what you're going through, you have a group here that's going to embrace you, understand as best we can, and help uplift. And so what we did was we partnered with another brand that was very active within the CrossFit community as a cancer survivor resource. They were called Barbells for Boobs. And unfortunately, they have recently had to disband. Unfortunately, they were a great organization within our community. And they gave not only testing opportunities and things like that, but a lot of resources around um, cancer for cancer survivors at various stages, but also the resources that come along with what's needed from a fitness perspective. Where am I in my diagnosis through to my post op? What do I need to be doing from a fitness? What's okay? What's not okay? speaking with PTs and doctors and nutritionists and sleep experts and all of these things that go into making sure that the person who's going through it, one, like we said, feels like they have the community to help rally around them, but also to understand what they can and can't do. Because the way that we normally teach is that, we're going to teach this method and scale it according to maybe your fitness level or your mobility challenges. And what we've also had to learn is, there are a lot of other things that we need to take into consideration in terms of how we approach different groups of people. And I have to say that, we tested it out a few different times at camp with Barbells for Boobs. And then eventually they ended up bringing a group of scholarship winners through this program that they had. And there were 15 survivors that all came together. And it was one of the most impactful experiences for them, but also for our entire staff and the other campers. They had an experience that, unfortunately, the intention was to continue to grow it and have more of these experiences and have more of the survivors to come out and work towards having a survivor-only camp. And that was really what we were intending to do for this upcoming year, but it never panned out. But I have to say that when they came out in the various kind of groups that they did, uh, it was one of the most important and memorable moments that we've had in our 10 years, is having that group and us being able to say, okay, no matter where you're at, you're going to have a family within the Power Monkey community, and we're going to be able to help you as much as we possibly can wherever you are in your recovery journey.
Dave, I'd love to get into the specifics of that, right? So, if you can think of one person or two people, can you describe a little bit about how you were able to help them build fitness at whatever level they were? And I'll tell you where I want to go with this. I'd love for you to talk about the pillars of fitness in general, and then talk about how that manifests in the cancer survivor population. Because I can tell you that being a survivor myself, it's really hard to figure out who's a good coach, who you can trust, who's going to give you like actual support and actual help that is evidence based. And I put that in air quotes because, I think it means different things across the population. But there's a lot of difference between an evidence based approach that we know works versus a hack. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what are the pillars of fitness, generally speaking, and then how that applies to this population or how you've applied it to this population.
Sure. So, I mean, from my perspective, there are a few distinct pillars of health. And, depending on who you're speaking to, they'll tell you which ones are more important depending on what research is coming out. But obviously, fitness and movement, consistent movement, is fairly critical. I mean, it's probably, if not the top, one of the most important in terms of overall wellness, overall longevity, and things like that. Now, what that movement looks like for each person is relatively different. In our community, it's pretty intense, and even the survivors enjoy doing CrossFit workouts, and we would have to tailor the workouts according to where the person was within their journey. And so, post-op scar tissue issues would need to be dealt with a particular way. Mobility needs to be a bigger component of that person's training in terms of what they can and can't do so that they can get back into the full ranges of movements that are required for the workouts. But along with this fitness component, because I think people just think, okay, I should just work out and, find a coach that's going to help me. But obviously, nutrition is a absolute critical piece of this, and it needs to be something that is looked at more closely according to your genetics. You should have testing done according to what you're most sensitive to, what's appropriate for what you're capable of dealing with what you have going on, what types of training you plan on doing. But the nutritional component is obviously a huge pillar. And then sleep. Sleep is one it's gotten an incredible amount of discussion points and newfangled toys to play with, whether that it's a fitness tracker like a Whoop or a Fitbit or whatever it might be that tracks your sleep metrics and heart rate variability and all these other things that kind of allow you to understand what your sleep looks like, or 8 Sleep that does it through a mattress pad. These things have become much more common to be able to actually analyze the data around good and poor sleep habits. So those three are kind of the fundamental pillars of a solid well-being. I wouldn't even say fitness regimen, because fitness and movement is one of those, but just in terms of wellness and longevity, I would say that those three are absolutely critical. I would add one more to that, and it's a social component, and it kind of fits along with what I was saying about what camp provides, and it provides more wellness for your mental health. And so, you can have great nutrition. You can get all the sleep in the world. You can be the most fit person in the world. And you can be like me, like I was before '04, just completely miserable. And so, social components, social interactions, being able to actually have a group of people that you can lean on and speak up to when you're going through particular issues is as fundamental as those other three.
How would you think, so for a cancer population, and maybe we can just pick the fitness pillar, for the cancer population, specifically survivors, right? So you're outside of active treatment. So you're done with chemo if you had it, radiation, surgery. You're done with the kind of more like common modalities, bone marrow transplants, etc. You're done with like active treatment, and you're kind of in this mode of like rebuilding life. So for someone in that mode, can you talk to a little bit about how would you guide that individual to rebuild fitness? So I heard mobility, I
Yeah.
heard scar tissue. What are the other elements in there?
Yeah, I think mobility is a critical one. I think it's not just critical for this particular population, but it's one of those things that's normally missed for general population as well. Just the value that comes along with a more pliable, more mobile body, because what it allows you to do is it kind of unveils and allows the body to create the shapes that we need for any other movement that we want to go on to do. It'll allow you to run better, allow your stride to be
Hmm.
kind of a little bit more appropriate, allow you to get into a better, squat position or overhead position or handstand position, whatever you're trying to do. So, from my perspective, mobility is an absolutely critical building point, but also something that needs to be sustained. And one of the interesting things about mobility
Hmm.
is that the research is showing that it's actually easier to gain more mobility than maybe we give credit for, as long as we're consistent with it.
Huh.
And maybe that's where the hard part comes in, is that it's much better to spend a few minutes per day around a weak point around mobility, rather than saying, Saturdays are my yoga day and I'm going to go do my hour-long yoga class on Saturdays. That's been shown to be much less
Hmm.
beneficial in terms of long-term mobility, rather than small bite-sized chunks of time, really not needing to spend more than 5 minutes per day. Really, 5 to 10 minutes per week has been shown to be as effective as anything beyond that
Hmm.
per muscle group. So it's really possible to do it, as long as you're diligent about the amount of time that you spend. And the other thing I would say is working in groups. And this is specific. This is great for
Hmm.
everyone, but specifically with cancer survivor population, working with
Hmm.
partners and having someone to feel like you can get through maybe some of the struggles, because there are a lot of cases, especially with the population that we work with, they were incredible athletes prior, and then they go through this incredible challenge and they come out the other end and they're not the same athlete that they were, and so they feel like something is missing, like they're no longer their same self. And so being able to lean on maybe someone else in the gym who you really trust, a family member, a friend, the person who's in your class. But what we've noticed is that it's
Hmm.
someone else that's maybe gone through the same thing. That's why coming together with another survivor and being able to say, hey, we've gone through this together. We're going to overcome this next barrier of
Yeah.
getting back to where we were physically together. That's been shown to be incredibly powerful. And so, what I
Hmm.
didn't mention about the cohort, the group that came out to camp together, is that most of them didn't know each other before camp. They were all from different
Hmm.
parts of the country. They were kind of entered into this scholarship, this contest to win a spot, paid for spot to come out to Power Monkey Camp. And when they came to camp, most of them, as we saw with the other campers, they become incredibly close, and they became people that they still are in contact with. And I'm fortunate enough to travel, to a lot of the CrossFit competitions and vendor villages, and and I see a lot of them still, and many of them are still friends, and they hang out together and they work out together when they can. And I think this idea of finding a partner and finding someone who you can lean on and create some accountability with is an incredible way to kind of, you know, discuss things when they're challenging, but also push each other a little bit
Hmm.
further than we'd be able to do on our own.
Hmm. Interesting. Dave, I didn't hear you talk about strength or cardio. So the reason I can tell you why I'm asking about strength and cardio as well as mobility is, at least in my case, I had chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, about a year of infusions after that. And I definitely lost mobility, specifically on my right side. But I also, because of the chemo, lost a lot of muscle mass. So I went from being pretty healthy. I'm not a weekend warrior. I work out, but I was not super intense as an athlete or anything. But I lost the ability to sit and stand. I found it very difficult getting up from the couch, right? So the loss of strength was incredibly disconcerting for me. And the second thing that happened was, for a long period of time during chemotherapy, just getting off the couch and going for a 10-minute walk feels like you're climbing Mount Everest,
Hmm.
right? So even rebuilding cardiovascular health for me has been it's just taken me, I mean, I'm 2 years out almost now. It's taken me 2 years to feel comfortable enough to go back to the dojang,
Hmm.
to
Can
be
I
able
can
to
I ask what
last
kind of
an hour and a
training?
half in a martial arts class. Like, mm-hmm.
Interesting. Can I ask what kind
Go
of
ahead. What was the
fitness, or
question?
what your fitness regimen is now? Like, how consistent? What does it consist of? What kind of training are you doing outside of, especially prior
Sure.
to going back to the judo setting?
Sure. So I can tell you. So when I got done with treatment, I found a personal trainer, and we only did one session a week of 30 minutes. And he focused heavily on body weight stuff, just to slowly build back muscle mass. I
Hmm.
also was doing yoga twice a week. I had an instructor from India who was helping me with yoga. So that's where I started. And then I slowly switched from 30 minutes, I increased that to an hour. Then that went to 3 hours a week with a personal trainer, of strength training, so mostly free weight. Um, and now I'm doing like squats and deadlifts and things like that. Bench presses, a lot of stuff like that. So that's 3 times a week. I was trying to swim for a while. For a while, cardio in the sense of running was too much, too high impact for
Hmm.
me. So I started with low impact, started to swim, and then slowly had to increase that. So tried running. I don't like running. Just don't like it. Doesn't float my boat.
You're talking to a gymnast
Then
here,
this
so you don't
year,
have to explain yourself. We don't run at all in the gymnastics world, so I understand it.
and then this year, to go back to my cardio, I went back to taekwondo and judo. Judo I've never done before, so that was just kind of a cool add-on.
Hmm.
So now cardio comes from my judo taekwondo days, and then the rest of the days is strength training, and then once a week yoga. That's my current
Amazing.
regimen.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like you're on a pretty good system now. And strength training, I think, should be um, absolutely part of the regimen. Again, it's not just for the survivor population, but strength training, especially as we get older, what we notice is, strength training benefits will have a lot of benefits actually to your cardio as well. We don't see as much of the reverse. So cardio will not help with your strength training as much as your strength training will actually have some benefits towards your cardiovascular endurance as well, especially depending on how you're doing it. CrossFit World, the way that we implement a lot of our training methodology within that space has a lot of strength training with things like EMOMs, where you're doing things on the minute every minute, or you're doing
Hmm.
things that require strength, but doing them at a little bit, CrossFit says at high intensity, but I don't think it's necessary to do things at high intensity to be able to always to do things at high intensity to be able to get the real value out of it. but being able to do it at least moderate intensity, doing some strength training with some intensity, meaning a little bit of a cardiovascular push to it,
Mm,
will probably be where you're going to get the most benefit. So
mm,
you'll start to see your running times improve. You'll start to see your ability to maybe swim a little bit more effectively by doing some strength training with moderate to high level of intensities rather than just doing maybe deadlifts
mm,
where the way a weightlifter would, where you're just doing it purely for strength gains, where you're doing a specific lift, resting for 2-3 minutes, or maybe doing with a superset or something where you're just trying to tackle it from a few different muscle components. But doing things at moderate to high intensity with that strength component will have a lot of transferability to your cardiovascular you know intensity as well. It'll kind of have dual purpose. So that's kind of
mm,
what we try to encourage in terms of some steps to be able to kind of regain some of those lost components between strength and cardio.
Dave, can I ask you a potentially dumb question here? So when you say include or like go to moderate to high intensity in a strength workout, can you give me an example of that?
So a lot of it would be based around first. I don't know if you have baselines around your one rep max numbers. It doesn't necessarily have to be definitive. You can also go off of
Sure.
RPE, your perceived exertion, like basically how close you are to a 10 on a particular movement, how difficult it is for you. And then most of the time, we like to
Mm-hmm.
stay within like a 60 to 70, maybe push it up to like an 80% of that within the workout. So
Got it.
you need to find a baseline and then have your workouts kind of just be sub below that so that you are able to kind of
Mm,
maintain a solid level of intensity while pushing that strength component
mm,
to a point where it's challenging but still doable for you.
mm. Got it.
And what
Okay,
I
so
would
it's all
say,
about the RPE. Mhm.
yeah, RPE
Go
is
ahead.
I think a phenomenal way for especially people that don't really know how to figure out a one rep max with a deadlift or a squat or whatever it might be. Gives you as the individual the ability to kind of moderate that a little bit more. Um, but especially from our world, one of the main emphasis that we always put on is just the technical component. I would never hear the
Mm,
end of it from the Power Monkey community if I didn't mention the importance of moving with quality. So by by not always trying to go to that highest tier of intensity within your
mm,
movement, it will allow you to make sure that the
mm,
technical aspects of the movement are maintained. So your back is staying flat on a deadlift and your lower back is staying flat on a deadlift, and you're understanding
mm,
how to work through fuller ranges of motion on your squat and trying to get through that bottom position with knees being pressed out and good alignment happening. And so there's a consideration of technical components here that will be allowed to be kept in place if you allow the intensity of the movement to be kept basically within a range
I see.
that is more within that 70 to 80% essentially.
Awesome. So that makes perfect sense to me. I'm beginning to realize that a lot of our audience probably doesn't do strength training at
Okay.
all. So for that audience, if they were just starting out, right, this is their first time, they have no idea what RPE is, they don't know what one rep max is, they've never done a deadlift, they've never done a squat, and they're a survivor, they know that resistance training, weightlifting, strength training, something in that universe is that they need to start because one, people talk about it, two, hopefully oncologists are talking to you about this. And if not, you are just trying to rebuild basic muscle strength, right? Where would someone like that start?
Exactly where you started. I would recommend them starting exactly where you started with your trainer, and that's with body weight movements. And start with body weight. Don't worry about picking up weights. And the reason for it is because you have to learn how your body moves through fuller ranges of motion before you can expect to do those movements with external loads. So, absolutely work on what we call in the Power Monkey world is in the first phase of gymnastics movement learning. And we think that gymnastics is kind of fundamental to everything else that you go on to learn. Like, we don't expect people that come through Power Monkey to go on to the Olympics, but we just think that learning basic bodyweight gymnastics movements will allow you to be a better mover in anything that you go on to do. And really, the phase one is about more mobility, as we discussed, but also a stronger core. Like we said, it's about shapes, shape creation. So if you
Mm,
have a strong core and you have a
mm,
mobile body, you will allow your body will be capable of creating the shapes that you need for higher skill development. So those are two things that we recommend people doing on a daily basis. You should spend 5 to 10 minutes on core work. You spend 5 to 10 minutes on mobility work on a daily basis. Those two things will have incredible value no matter what you're looking to do. And then beyond that, you start working on your push, your pull, your squat work, your ability to work on lunges and lateral and a lot of oblique work and rotational work, and trying to move your body through a lot of different planes and directions, so that you can start becoming accustomed to what these things might look like in daily life. And then you kind of have to say, okay,
mm,
what are my goals with this? Am I just looking to get back to what I was doing before? Or, do I have an athletic achievement that I'm trying to pursue? Is it more about just kind of moving through my daily life without pain and being able to work out and play with my kids and that kind of thing? And so the prioritization needs to be put into place in terms of what the next goal
mm,
is. And from there, you can say, okay, now let's think about how we can implement,
mm.
a barbell into this training, or some dumbbells or kettlebells, or something a little bit more externally weight loaded, depending on what those goals actually are.
That was super, super helpful. I really appreciate that answer, Dave. I'm realizing we are at the point where we could probably keep talking for the next hour, but we should probably start to wrap up our session. And
Sure.
I was trying to think of a theme that I heard kind of consistently through your life journey, starting out as an athlete, transitioning into this moment of being a coach, building this company, and then also kind of the guidance and advice you've been giving me and the audience that's listening to this podcast. And the theme that stands out is consistency. And I was wondering if you could help us close out with the importance of consistency in whatever level someone might be. If they're just starting out, if they're a Olympian, what does consistency mean to you? What advice would you give someone to be consistent in whatever their goal is with
Yeah, I
wellness,
think that's
longevity, and then fitness?
I appreciate that comment, and I think it's a really important one. Whenever we're teaching our seminars, I have a bunch of training principles that we go over right when we start our seminars. Important things. Be patient in this learning process, and the importance of, if you have some habits that we need to break, going back. And the last one on this list is consistency. The importance of consistency. Heard it probably endlessly in other areas. That consistency is key to this whole thing, and I always kind of stress the idea that the consistency is on the end user. Like, we can give you every skill, every tool, drill in the world to kind of help improve your mechanics and your movement ability and the quality of your movement, but the consistency is really on the end user. And it's imperative on you to wake up every day and put a priority on how important these things are to you. It doesn't need to start massive, and I think that that's the thing that's really important with consistency. It can start as easy as, I'm going to walk to the end of the block today and come back and just do that for this week. I'm going to try to stand up and sit back down to my chair 5 times, 10 rounds today, just to get some squat work in, even if it's just to the chair, and try that for a whole week. And then from that week, let me see if I can do 2 weeks. And I think sometimes what ends up happening is people set the goal so high initially. Every January 1st, someone sets this incredible new fitness goal that becomes unachievable because, after a week, they want to go back to eating whatever they were eating prior. And the goals need to be set so that you can have a sense of achievement, so that you can have a sense of this bite size. All right, I at least understand that I can complete that goal. And if I can complete that goal, let me just
Hmm.
add a tiny bit to it. And these things start to snowball over time. And I mean, in the gymnastics world, as in just about anything that's worth pursuing, it's about small incremental gains. And when we talk about consistency, that's what we want to see. We want to see a baby step, one step in the right direction. If the goal is to go to the Olympic Games, I'm really not concerned whether or not that goal is ever achieved. It's the last thing on my mind. If that end goal is there, what we want to see is that the process is correctly in place so that the trajectory will allow you to work towards that. one tiny incremental step at a time, because I guarantee you, if you do that, you're going to expose yourself to so many things that you didn't think you were capable of doing, or maybe some new directional pieces that you've opened up because of these small changes that will completely change your ability to understand what you're capable of doing as an athlete. And I'm thinking about every person being an athlete in this case. But when we talk about consistency, it needs to start with something attainable, something small, one day at a time, and then allow it to grow from there. Don't set the goals so unachievable that it frustrates you to not want to keep the consistency going.
I love that. That's such a beautiful wrap up. That consistency and your goal needs to be something that is attainable, baby steps, and then you're taking it one day at a time. And I feel as though that really does very nicely summarize all of the work that you've done for the elite athletes, but also those that can be applied to all of our cancer patients and survivors.
Yeah, we
Dave,
have
thank you
a.
so much for being here and sharing all of your wisdom with us.
Oh, of course. I just
Go
want to say
ahead.
one little thing on that last piece about consistency. Up in the gym at Stanford, there was always a phrase up on the wall of just taking pride in the process. Take pride in the process, and we try to convey that as much as we can. Just, the process is really what matters. Like, no matter what you're pursuing, the process should always take precedent over the end goal or the end outcome. Because if you take pride in the process, the end will kind of take care of itself. And so, just take pride in what you're doing, one day at a time, one little stepping stone at a time, and make sure you have some support along the way, because it goes a long way in being able to keep things in perspective.
That is a beautiful wrap up. I really appreciate you sharing everything with us, Dave. Thank you for telling us your story. And I know that this episode is going to be incredibly valuable to anyone listening in. So thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Great speaking with you.
This podcast, show notes, and newsletter is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice, and no doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of information on this podcast or any materials linked from this blog is at the user's own risk. The content here is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical condition they may have and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.